My son is sweeter than my husband, a cautionary tale. In the bustling city of Kasanga, where modern life blended with traditional values, there lived a couple named Adissa and Enkay. Their love had once been the talk of the neighborhood, a romance that seemed destined to withstand the test of time. But as the years went by, things changed, especially after the birth of their son, Chidi. What had once been a balanced partnership began to shift, and Enkay's love for her child grew beyond what anyone would have expected. From the moment Chidi was born, Enkay devoted herself entirely to him. She was enchanted by his innocent eyes and soft giggles. The love she felt for her son filled the void she had long felt in her marriage. Adissa, though a hard-working and dedicated husband, had never been able to meet Enkay's emotional and physical needs. Enkay found herself transferring all her affection to Chidi, convinced that he would grow up to be the man she had always dreamed of. Enkay's love for Chidi soon became obsessive. She refused to let any of the housemaids bathe or discipline him. If anyone made Chidi cry, even by accident, they were immediately dismissed from their duties. Her protectiveness was unwavering. "Only I know what my son needs," she would say whenever Adissa suggested they let the maids help. As Chidi grew older, Enkay would often bathe him herself. She took pride in ensuring that her son was well-groomed and healthy. During these moments, she would gently remind him, "You must grow up strong and wise, Chidi. You must be better than your father." It was a statement laced with both hope and disappointment, a reflection of Enkay's dissatisfaction with Adissa. Adissa, meanwhile, grew increasingly uneasy with Enkay's behavior. He loved his son deeply, but felt that Enkay's overprotectiveness was stifling. He noticed how Chidi was growing up without learning discipline or boundaries. Whenever Adissa tried to teach Chidi about responsibility or correct his behavior, Enkay would intervene. "Don't be too hard on him, Adissa," she would say. "He's just a boy." Adissa would sigh, feeling helpless. "Enkay, he needs to learn. The world won't always be kind to him. He needs to understand that there are rules and consequences." But Enkay would shake her head. "My son will grow up to be a great man. He doesn't need harsh lessons. He needs love." As Chidi approached his 5th birthday, his curiosity grew, and he began asking questions about the world around him. One day, during bath time, he asked Enkay an innocent question. "Mama, why do you have those 2 things on your chest?" Enkay smiled at her son's curiosity. "These are called breasts, my son. They are for feeding babies, just like I fed you when you were little." Chidi nodded, satisfied with the answer, but his questions didn't stop there. "Why is my body different from yours? Why do I have something long and yours is flat?" Enkay chuckled at his innocent curiosity. "That's because you're a boy and I'm a woman. When you grow up, you'll understand more about the differences between men and women." As the years passed, Enkay continued to indulge Chidi's curiosity. She saw no harm in answering his questions, believing that honesty was the best way to raise a confident and knowledgeable child. But Adissa grew increasingly concerned. He felt that some boundaries were being crossed, even if Enkay couldn't see it. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Adissa decided to voice his concerns. "Enkay, we need to talk about how you're raising Chidi." Enkay looked up from her plate, surprised by his tone. "What do you mean?" "You're too lenient with him. You're letting him ask questions that aren't appropriate for his age, and you're allowing him to grow too attached to you. He needs to learn boundaries." Enkay frowned. "He's my son, Adissa. I know what's best for him. Why are you always trying to interfere?" Adissa sighed, trying to keep his frustration in check. "I'm not interfering. I'm his father. It's my duty to ensure he grows up to be a responsible man. But the way you're raising him, he's becoming too dependent on you." Enkay shook her head. "Chidi is my everything. I won't let anyone tell me how to raise him. Not even you." Adissa felt a pang of hurt at her words. He realized that Enkay no longer saw him as a partner in raising their child. Instead, she saw herself as the sole authority in Chidi's life. This realization filled him with dread. He feared that if things continued this way, Their son would grow up without understanding the importance of respect, discipline, and boundaries. Despite his reservations, Adisa tried to be patient. He hoped that Nkem would eventually see the need for balance in Chitty's upbringing. But as the days turned into months, nothing changed. Nkem's love for Chitty continued to grow, and Adisa found himself feeling more and more like an outsider in his own family. One day, Adisa walked into the living room to find Chitty sitting on Nkem's lap, asking her more questions about the world. He listened quietly as Nkem answered each question with patience and love. But when Chitty asked, "Mama, why do you love me more than Papa?" Adisa's heart broke. Nkem looked surprised by the question. "I love both of you, my dear. But you're my little boy. You're my special gift." Adisa couldn't stay silent any longer. "Nkem, this needs to stop. You're making him think that he's the center of your world. That's not healthy for him. He needs to understand that love is shared, not exclusive." Nkem stood up, holding Chitty close to her. "You don't understand, Adisa. Chitty is my everything. He gives me the love and fulfillment that I've never felt from you." Adisa felt the weight of her words like a blow to his chest. He realized then that Nkem's love for Chitty wasn't just motherly. It was her way of filling the emotional void in her life. And he feared that if things didn't change, their family would be torn apart by the very love that was supposed to hold them together. As the days passed, Adisa wrestled with his thoughts. He knew he needed to find a way to reach Nkem and make her understand the importance of balance in their family. But deep down, he feared that it might already be too late, that Nkem's love for Chitty had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. The tension in the household had reached a boiling point. Adisa's growing frustration with Nkem's favoritism toward Chitty was now palpable, and Chitty's protectiveness of his mother had begun to border on possessiveness. The air in the house seemed thicker with unspoken emotions, and every glance, every word exchanged between the three carried hidden meanings. One evening, Nkem sat in the living room, brushing her hair in front of a mirror. The soft glow of the lantern illuminated her face, making her appear younger and more radiant. Chitty walked in quietly, his footsteps barely making a sound on the tiled floor. He watched his mother for a moment, noticing how the light caught in her hair, the way her lips curved into a faint smile as she hummed an old tune. "Mama," Chitty called softly. Nkem turned, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. "Chitty, my darling, come sit with me." He moved to her side, sitting on the floor by her feet like he used to when he was a child. Nkem ran her fingers through his hair, a gesture that had always comforted both of them. "Are you tired?" she asked. Chitty shook his head. "I was just thinking about you, Mama. You work so hard. You deserve to rest." Nkem smiled, touched by his concern. "You always take care of me, Chitty. You're my rock." There was a pause, a moment where the air between them seemed to shift. Chitty looked up at her, his eyes filled with something deeper than mere affection. "Mama, why do you always seem sad when Papa's around?" he asked. Nkem sighed, her gaze distant. "Your father and I, we've grown apart, my son. He doesn't understand me the way you do." Chitty frowned. "He shouldn't make you sad. You deserve to be happy." Nkem cupped his face, her eyes misty. "Oh, my Chitty, you always say the sweetest things. You've grown into such a fine young man. You make me proud every day." The moment lingered, both of them lost in their thoughts. Chitty reached out, taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, reassuring. But there was something else, an unspoken tension that neither of them acknowledged. Later that night, as the household settled into silence, Chitty couldn't sleep. His thoughts were consumed by the conversation he'd had with his mother. He tossed and turned, the image of her gentle smile and soft voice haunting him. Unable to resist, he got out of bed and made his way to his parents' room. He paused outside the door, hearing Ray's voices inside. "I'm tired of this, Nkem." Adisa's voice was filled with frustration. "You always put Chitty first. You treat him like he's the man of the house. Not me." Maybe that's because he treats me better than you ever have. Nkem shot back. There was a pause, a tense silence that hung heavily in the air. What are you saying? Adissa's voice was quieter now, laced with suspicion. I'm saying that for years, I've been alone in this marriage. You've never been able to fulfill me, not emotionally, not physically. And I'm done pretending. Chitty clenched his fist, anger boiling inside him. How dare his father make his mother feel this way? He took a step back, his mind racing. The next morning, Nkem found Chitty in the kitchen, making breakfast. You're up early, she said, surprised. Chitty smiled at her. I wanted to do something nice for you, Mama. Nkem's heart swelled with affection. She moved closer, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. You're too good to me, Chitty. Days passed, and the bond between mother and son grew stronger. The lines of affection blurred, each moment filled with lingering touches and longing glances. One evening, Nkem complained of a sore back, and Chitty offered to massage her. Are you sure? Nkem asked, a hint of hesitation in her voice. Chitty nodded. Of course. I want to help you relax. Nkem wrapped herself in a towel and lay on the bed, her back exposed. Chitty's hands were gentle as they moved over her shoulders, easing the tension in her muscles. Nkem sighed, closing her eyes. That feels wonderful, she murmured. Chitty's hands moved lower, and Nkem felt a shiver run down her spine. She opened her eyes, glancing back at him. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Chitty. Nkem's voice was a whisper. He leaned in, his hand resting on her shoulder. I just want to make you happy, Mama. You deserve to be happy. Nkem turned to face him fully, the towel slipping slightly. She didn't move to adjust it. Instead, she reached out, touching his cheek. You're the only one who truly understands me, she said softly. Chitty's heart raced. He leaned closer, their faces inches apart. Mama, before either of them could think, their lips met in a gentle, hesitant kiss. Chitty tried to withdraw, but the mother drew him closer. The lips turned to romance, and the pestle was deep into the mortal. It was Chitty's first time. The mother tutored him in every section, and it was a great ending after 40 minutes. Immediately Chitty withdrew, the mother shout, for over 25 years I never come. Wow. Chitty did not understand that word come or the satisfaction in it. He was terrified that he has done the unthinkable. The mother saw that and asked him not to worry. I'm sorry, Chitty whispered. I didn't mean... Nkem shook her head, her eyes filled with tears. No, Chitty, don't apologize. Silence enveloped them, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. Nkem stood up, adjusting her towel. This stays between us, she said firmly. Your father must never know. Chitty nodded, his mind racing. I understand, but the line had been crossed, and there was no turning back. The intimacy between mother and son grew in secret, each stolen moment adding to their guilt and desire. Adissa, oblivious to the storm brewing in his home, continued to struggle with his place in the family. He noticed the changes in his wife and son, but he couldn't pinpoint the cause. One day, Adissa confronted Nkem again, his frustration boiling over. You've been distant, Nkem. What's going on? Nkem stared at him, her expression unreadable. Nothing you would understand. Adissa's patience snapped. I am your husband. You owe me an explanation. Before Nkem could respond, Chitty stepped into the room. Don't speak to her like that, he said coldly. Adissa turned to his son, his eyes narrowing. Stay out of this, Chitty. This is between your mother and me. No, it's not, Chitty replied, his voice steady. Mama deserves better than you, and I won't let you hurt her any more. The tension in the room was suffocating. Adissa took a step toward Chitty, but before he could say anything, Nkem intervened. Enough, she said quietly. This family is broken, and it's time we face the truth. Adissa stared at her, realization dawning in his eyes. Broken? What truth? Nkem looked at Chitty, a silent understanding passing between them. The line had been crossed, and the consequences would be devastating. Adissa couldn't understand that very moment. He was furious. Walk out in anger, and for a walk to cool in mind. Their intimacy between mother and son became a routine, a secret ritual shared behind closed doors. Each time Chitty would hesitate, his heart pounding with guilt and fear, he would whisper, "Hope Daddy won't know." And each time, Nkem would reassure him, her voice soft and soothing, "This is our secret, Chitty, a mother and child secret. No one must ever know. Every Connor is a deep, back-to-back, front-to-back. They both enjoy every time." Nkem is always longing on his Chitty to come back from school, and Chitty could not wait to get home. Though a part of them feel happy, but guilt also lingered in their mind. The guilt weighed heavily on Chitty, but the thrill of being desired and the comfort of his mother's embrace kept him coming back. For Nkem, Chitty was everything Adissa wasn't, a lover who brought her the pleasure she had craved for so long. She reveled in their encounters, her heart racing with each forbidden touch. Her son had become her escape, her solace, her forbidden love. Adissa, meanwhile, remained oblivious to the true nature of their bond, though he couldn't ignore the growing distance between himself and his wife. He often caught them sharing secret smiles or spending too much time alone together. His suspicions grew, but he pushed them aside, unable to entertain the unthinkable. He told himself it was merely a mother's love for her child, nothing more. But everything changed on one fateful afternoon. Adissa came home unexpectedly early from work. The house was eerily quiet, save for the faint sound of whispers coming from the bedroom. As he approached the door, his heart began to pound with an inexplicable dread. The sound grew louder. "Yes, my boy. Bring it on." Ouch. "You are the best ever, my love." Adissa couldn't take it with speed and force. He pushed the door open and froze. There, in the middle of the room, was his wife, Nkem, naked and tangled with their son, Chitty. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Adissa's vision blurred, and his legs gave out beneath him. He collapsed to the floor unconscious. Chitty jumped to his feet. Panic etched across his face. "What do we do, Mama?" he whispered, trembling. Nkem, ever composed, quickly gathered her robe and covered herself. "Go to your room," she instructed calmly. "I'll handle this." Chitty hesitated, fear and shame warring within him. But he obeyed. He dressed quickly and disappeared down the hallway, leaving his mother to face the consequences alone. Adissa stirred moments later, his eyes fluttering open to find himself lying on their bed, Nkem sitting calmly beside him. His head throbbed with confusion and disbelief. Was what I saw real? Or was I? Nkem cut him off, her voice cold and unwavering. "Yes, Adissa, it's exactly what you saw. After 25 years of enduring your inability to satisfy me, I found affection where it was closest." Adissa's heart shattered. He sat up, shaking his head in disbelief. "Nkem, do you hear yourself? That's our son, our child. How could you?" "Don't act surprised," Nkem snapped. "You've known for years that I was unhappy. I begged you to do something about it. I cried for your attention, your passion, but you gave me nothing. Chitty is 100 times the man you ever were in bed. I never had the experience of coming for one since I meet it. I never know what it feels like. You never made me the woman I was created to be. My boy goes 6 round, and more unlike his father that his 2 round is not up to 3 minutes. You are a shame to me, and there is not shame in paying shame with shame." Her words were like daggers to his heart. Adissa stood, his fists clenched, anger and despair coursing through him. "You're sick, Nkem. This is twisted. I can't believe what I'm hearing." Just as Adissa raised his hand, ready to strike her in his rage, Chitty burst into the room. "Don't you dare touch her," he shouted, stepping between his parents. "Get out of my way, Chitty," Adissa growled, trying to push him aside. But Chitty, fueled by fear and fury, grabbed a heavy ornament from the bedside table, a bronze statue, and swung it with all his might. The blow landed with a sickening thud. Adissa crumpled to the floor, blood pooling beneath his head. The room fell into silence, broken only by Nkem's horrified gasp. "Mama, I didn't mean to," Chitty whispered, dropping the statue. His hands trembled as he stared at his father's lifeless body. Nkem knelt beside Adissa, checking for a pulse. There was none. Her mind raced, calculating their next move. "We have to cover this up," she said quietly. "No one can know what happened here." They worked quickly, wrapping Adissa's body in a sheet and carrying it to the back of the house. They buried him in the garden, under the cover of darkness, their hearts heavy with guilt and fear. For a while, life went on as usual. Nkem and Chitty kept their dark secret, pretending that Adissa had left on a business trip and never returned. But the weight of their actions began to take its toll, especially on Chitty. As he grew older, Chitty's relationship with his mother soured. The guilt and shame he carried became unbearable, and he began to resent Nkem for what she had done to him. He blamed her for the life he could never have, the love he could never find. Chitty sought solace in older women, sugar mummies, trying to recreate the twisted bond he had shared with his mother. But no relationship ever felt right. He was haunted by his past, unable to connect with anyone on a genuine level. One day, he confronted Nkem. "You ruined me," he said, his voice trembling with anger and pain. "I'll never be able to love anyone. I'll never have a normal life. You stole that from me." Nkem, now a shadow of her former self, sat in silence, tears streaming down her face. She had lost everything, her husband, her son, and her sanity. The weight of her choices had finally crushed her spirit. Chitty left that day and never returned. He drifted from one meaningless relationship to another, always searching for something he couldn't name. His life became a series of empty encounters, each one leaving him feeling more hollow than the last. Years later, Nkem was found dead in her home, alone and forgotten. The community whispered about her tragic end, unaware of the dark secrets she had carried to her grave. Chitty, now a broken man, stood at her graveside, tears in his eyes. "I loved you, Mama," he whispered, "but you destroyed me." As he walked away, he knew he would never find peace. The tragedy of their forbidden bond had left scars too deep to heal. It was a story of love twisted into something monstrous, a tale of secrets that should never have been kept, and a reminder that some boundaries should never be crossed.